Hi, welcome to this episode of Hollywood Breaks. It's good to be with you on this Friday. Today we're talking to Keith's old friend, Tim Heindl from Lionsgate. And Keith, what I appreciate about this conversation is Tim's insight into the humanity and data kind of requirements for marketing.
Yeah, I mean, that's one great things about Tim is that he's very data driven, but at the same time, he understands the human component that really drives a lot of decision making. And I think that's really unique in sort of the research space, particularly in entertainment. So I think you guys are going to love this conversation.
Yep. So sit back, enjoy the conversation, and we'll see you again next week.
I still think the theatrical experience is a special, magical thing. And I think this past weekend reinforced that despite the naysayers, who are always so quick to jump. As soon as there's a slight stumble in going all the way
it's
back
over.
It's over, right? Going back to the beginning, the beginning. It's this weird kind of like.
It's funny. I always go back anytime everyone talks about the death of the industry or it's over and whatever. I think you had already left at this point, but when Jim took over as the sole chairman, once Tom had departed, he did a big town hall. And he threw up all these sort of articles that said the movie industry is dead. It's done. It's over. And then he showed what the dates were. One was the innovation of TV that was going to end the movie industry. Then it was the VHS market. TVs are done. Oh, wait, no, DVDs, even higher quality. It's over. And he's just like, they've been talking about a death of our industry since the industry started. So don't worry, we're not going anywhere. So I do think you're right that there are always naysayers. And, it was heartening to see a movie open the way it did, and it did well. And, that was great to see. My one worry is, and I'd be interested to see what your thoughts are on this, I worry about original ideas. Like I worry about original, not based on an IP or a comic book or a novel or something that already doesn't have a built-in audience. Like think about Quiet Place. How would that have done now? Would it have done just as well without sort of the lead up that, just sort of the word of mouth and, everyone wanted to go see it because everyone was talking about how great it was. Like, would a movie like that open now? Like, that's what I worry about. Because you look at like Godzilla, okay, that's got a built-in audience. Quiet Place 2 was based on, a sequel to a successful horror pick. I mean, the only other example we have is Tenet, which was obviously an unmitigated disaster for Warner Brothers in a lot of ways. So what my concern is like, well, what about original material? Like I was reading an article today that say adult dramas are basically dead as theatrical properties. They're just basically going to go to the streamers, like movies like The Father, which is supposedly a phenomenal movie, but you're not going to see that in the theater. So in your opinion, do you think that's the case, or is it just way too early to tell at this point?
I think way too early.
Yeah.
A and B, I think there is an element of like, there's a grain of truth in what you're saying because the windowing game is completely up in the air, right? Everyone's kind of experimenting. Let's call PVOD what it was, a like nice try. Not anymore. Come on, man. The price point of that, and we keep hearing it over and over again across multiple different surveys. It's unless you're Cruella, right? I mean, Disney's got that secret juice. They can get away with that and still maintain kind of that dual path. Mm-hmm. But for most other titles, $20 is too much. It's too much. Yeah. And it's just not sustainable. But that said, we're experimenting, right? We're trying different things with like different windows, different EST, electronic sale through price points at different intervals to see which one can maximize the opportunity for the title. I think it's really, I don't remember where I had read this, but I still really believe that ultimately it's going to be a dynamic model, that as the demand in theaters decreases, that triggers the EST kind of escalation window, and it could vary by title,
right,
depending upon how the audience is responding. And that's a way to keep, I think, to give an opportunity for those like adult dramas to have a little bit of a theatrical presence, because there's still baby boomers still go to the movies, cinephiles still go to the movies, and will still continue to go to the movies.
Yeah.
But it doesn't need to be in theaters for as long. And I say that.
Or
go ahead.
isn't it the big blockbuster experience that it's a given, right? That's why they made the Godzilla movie and Quiet Place movie. Like there's something in the environment of a theater that we could all buy into of like, I want to see the Avatar in a theater. I don't care to watch that at home. Even if I have 3D goggles at home or whatever that weird thing was that they had up for a while. I want to be in that surround sound of theatrical experience. But some of these other movies that are really just the streaming darlings are working because we're consuming so much more of that content on the OTT platforms. And I almost feel like I think the Netflix and Amazon and Disney all know they have us there, and because they are creating the content and they own the platform, I feel like they're dumbing down the content to keep us on those platforms. They're not necessarily giving us those big blockbuster items. Maybe that's why we need a Sony and Warner Brothers and Universal to be players, because they're trying to break away from those major shareholders in the OTT space.
I mean, I see. My thing is like, I wonder, because like you think about because you're right, Tim. They're all experimenting, which I think is great. I think we have said this over and over again on the podcast, but the pandemic sort of accelerated a lot of changes that were already sort of being discussed.
It's like a 10-year fast forward.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, we've been, the whole 90-day window had been they've been chipping away at the edges, and the exhibitors were always like, no way, we're not doing it. And, Universal was always trying to play with it, and they finally got their opportunity with the pandemic. But, you'll think about like, okay, so Quiet Place 2 is going to be 45-day theatrical release, and then it's going Paramount Plus, one imagines. And kudos to Jim Giannopoulos for resisting the pressure, which I'm sure was coming down from on high, to put it on Paramount Plus, a dual release. And he's like, no, we're doing a theatrical release. So kudos to Jim G for that and sticking to his guns on that. But I wonder if that, and you look at Fast and Furious 9, I think it's like 15 days or 17 days, and then it's going to go on to an OTT platform or something like that because of the new deals that Universal struck. So I'm just wondering, they're experimenting, but at the same time, are they sort of also almost shooting themselves in the foot? Because 17 days, like, I know there's the whole FOMO phenomenon, like you don't want to miss out on the 9th version of Fast and Furious. But that also relied on the fact that everyone was going to be talking about in the office, and not everyone's going to the office, and there really isn't the water cooler conversations happening. So is that sort of, is the industry shooting itself in the foot by being that aggressive, like 17 days? And then you look at Disney, you're right, they definitely have a different model, but they're also releasing it at home at the same time. So it's like, we're experimenting, but are we also like shooting ourselves in the foot?
I don't know. It's an interesting question, because I would have said yes when if we had spoken about this like a month ago or 2 months ago, and with a particular focus on the Warner Brothers experiment and with Disney. But that Warner Brothers has been such a fascinating kind of experiment as it's unfolded, right? And it's I mean, in some hands, it's like a flaming shit show. And on the other hand, it's a very curious case study in organizational restructuring and streamlining kind of content delivery. But I don't know if what Universal is proposing is a better way forward than what Disney's doing in terms of revenue generation. Because I'm sure they'll like, Fast is like tracking like a beast. It just came on this week, and looks like, it's not unreasonable for that to be our first $100 million post-pandemic movie, right? Not out of the realm. Given, I say that now with more confidence, given how Quiet Place blew past even the most aggressive expectations, right? Blew it out of the water.
Like out of the water.
Kind of like that AMC stock price.
Right. They're like, if we make 30
I'm not
million?
Sure.
Meanwhile, $57 million later.
Well, they're also, totally different audience, right? One is more of an adolescent market. I'm in Manhattan this week, and one of the things I said was the city looks very young. It's just like all the young people are out doing what they're doing. I don't know if Quiet Place was the adolescent market. Fast and Furious obviously very is. So, it's a great release, and hopefully it gives confidence to the other movies we've been waiting for. I think we've been waiting a year and a half for Maverick to come out. So I'm just going to forget.
Wait till November.
Bill 10. I think that might have written that one off by now.
That's like the landmine, the distribution landmine. I would not want to be. I feel for our distribution team,
yes,
because the dating game right now is like, it's not just landmines; they're like nuclear bombs.
Yeah,
they're sitting around every corner with gobs of pent up demand.
Yeah,
I mean, you unleash that. That's the. I have a little bit of envy.
Well, how about from the marketing point of view? I mean, SVP of Global Marketing Research, you clearly have some insight to give us the sense of like, is it easy? Like, basically, pretty much you just have to release it because there isn't very much being released. The competition is so little. Or do you feel like you are trying to convince people to come to theaters? What's the angle nowadays?
It's not easy. It's not. You have to have good product. In some ways, you kind of have to have better product.
Yeah.
Because there's still like COVID resistance. I mean, like we've been following. NRG does a COVID tracking deck, a separate deck every week that maps out attitudes and behaviors across a range of questions. And it's still, of the movie going population, like 3/4 are comfortable returning. I mean, which is fabulous compared to where it was, but still just 3/4.
Yeah.
And there's still one of the kookier numbers, and it just turned this week, was that people who were not vaccinated were more comfortable returning to theaters than people who were.
Wow.
Right? Like,
I can believe that to be true. I got to be honest with you I don't know. I feel like there is a boldness to a certain part of the marketplace that, again, just being here in Manhattan, which I don't live here, so just to kind of look at it and observer, there's some weird behavioral things that have happened and trigger things that are in place for some people and not others, and you can feel it from store to store, front to front. So I'm gonna guess there's like a certain idea of like of when you feel free and comfortable in a post-pandemic world.
Well, I think I've seen some research and articles that for a lot of people the pandemic was sort of like the moment. The people that like love to like stay home and watch Netflix, use Grubhub and all the apps where they never have to leave their house. Like this was like almost like, and they social interactions are awkward for them. Like this was like this is like heaven for them. Mm-hmm. And they got so used to it. And I think there are a lot of people who are like that. The fact that you had to go out and be social was just sort of part of an expectation of being a part of society. And a lot of people overcame a lot of their anxieties in order to participate. And then the pandemic happens and it's sort of like antisocial behavior is sort of encouraged. And now it's sort of fed that beast to the point where they're like, I don't want to go back out. I kind of like this.
I know. Like, everyone's feeling that return.
Why do I don't want to not wear a mask.
Jesus.
Where's my mask? I mean, and I think that's like the biggest overcome for a lot of the industry is like, there's going to be a group. I mean, it's great that 3/4 want to come back. That's awesome. But it's going to take something that like everyone is like a Titanic-like event. I feel like the movie that everyone is talking about, that's really going to be able to drive everyone. Because like, I can't miss out. All right. You know what? I've been doing this long enough. Everyone's talking about this movie. I have to see it.
Yep.
I think that's really the only, that's really going to just thaw the ice.
And it's going to take, it's going to take the summer. It'll take at least the summer.
Yeah.
Right. So like I've been at Lionsgate for almost 2 years now. I've been working from home longer than I've been working in the office. And I have colleagues who I've never physically met. Team members. Right? Like, bizarre.
That's so nuts.
Well, absolutely what's interesting, there's some interesting repercussions to what you're saying. So if non-vaccinated people are more likely to get into theaters than not, then clearly we're going towards a more conservative market in the theaters. So movies that would be successful in traditional distribution will be more conservative movies because it feels like the more conservative folks are the ones that are not being vaccinated and more out there. Now, all of a sudden, as a marketer, you're like, I have to make some liberal-esque movie look conservative to get people to show up, or really it will kind of start really segregating some of the crowd, even of like what people see or not. But there's like, that's an interesting influence that could play itself out of like who the people are in the theaters, what they want to see, what Hollywood's going to distribute in the theaters, and therefore what's going to have like a little bit of a surge. I can imagine there'd be a little bit of a surge.
100%. And the flip side of that coin is that we've had multiple studies that have delivered such concrete evidence supporting the idea that diversity in front and behind the camera equals more dollars. Simple. It's that simple. And so we gotta like lean into that with and that's been a really interesting transformative element of this summer for us internally, for the industry at large, for the society at large, but also for us particularly at Lionsgate. We've made a real authentic commitment to DE&I, and that is permeating into all facets and all decisions that we are making. And so it's been that said, we still, I think back to like the fall of 19 when we were all in the office together, and we had a movie like Rambo, right? Last Blood, which is like middle America, nostalgia, us versus them, blood and guts, border fights, that kind of, gangs. And then we had like Bombshell, the Roger Ailes, story with, that was lovely, right? And beautiful and extremely liberal, and totally different campaigns. But we've been doing this, we've always had this like middle America versus coastal kind of like mental framework through which we can deliver films and market materials. It's just it is what it is.
I'm just going to think Vice would not make it in today's market. Vice would be the one. I can see where Bombshell would make it in today's market, and Vice would not make it in the market because they're.
It's interesting. We'll see what the theatrical kind of appetite for those is, because there's probably 24 Trump movies
sitting in development right now, just waiting for the right moment.
The Shaman animated series.
yeah, exactly.
So where does that start, the diversity decision making? Does it start from the creative end of a studio? Do you guys in marketing research tell the creative end, hey, let's start making different decisions in our acquisitions of IP and different movies?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. Like we have a whole division now. We hired this wonderful woman, Kamala Avila Salmon, who, she has this podcast called From Woke to Work that I can't recommend strongly enough. And it is her sole focus, man. She is like a laser beam and prying open every one of those potential opportunities to maximize the opportunity. Because we know we've always known this, that Black audiences turn out for Black filmmakers, for Black actors, for Black stories, right? We have less of an understanding, and we have sort of an understanding amongst the Asian Pacific Islander community, in that they will turn out for a story of particular resonance. But how does that generalize to the Hispanic Latinx community? We're doing a research project on that now to explore the role of identity and representation in attendance and the kinds of stories that people want to see and hear. But there's still the all of that said, you still need I think that's why Marvel is so powerful. They're able to take those diversity themes and those diversity elements and incorporate them into that Marvel wrapper, and that communicates a theatrical experience in a way that it's harder for smaller titles too.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a really great point. So, do you, from the marketing research, do you influence the creative decisions of the studio? Then are you ahead of the game and telling studio heads, hey, this is what we see, or here's where we believe our research is telling us to go, and therefore influence acquisition?
Yes and no.
Well, do they trust you? I guess would be the question.
I say this: we're evolving. We're evolving. I love the Lionsgate team is so fabulous. Some of the best people I've ever come across in my time in the industry. We are actually doing that in a way that it's always been kind of a wish list thing for me, because we would always in marketing complain about or not complain, just it was matter of fact, you have to play the hand you're dealt.
Yeah.
If it's a shitty movie that was poorly executed with no budget, whatever, you still have to sell it. You got to figure out it's going to be somebody's favorite movie, right? No matter how bad it is, like The Pathfinder, for example, with Carl Urban, it is somebody's favorite movie, right?
Okay.
Difference now is that Joe Drake, our chairman, has made it very explicit that he wants data infused into all facets of decision making from top to bottom. So we are bringing, a combination of both of like survey research, analytics, and AI and machine learning to at least give a perspective. Inform sounds too powerful. It's really not that. It's just to give a perspective at the green light phase, right? That's where we need, I think, and particularly for us, because we're these streamers got big checkbooks, man. They're fighting with Goliaths, right?
Yeah.
So we're trying to we're sifting for hidden gems, right? We're looking for we have our franchises, of course. We have a new Hunger Games movie coming out in a couple of years. John Wick 4 just got announced. It's going to be massive. We have Borderlands.
My kids will like that. They're John Wick fans. They're going to love that.
They're going to love this. Love this. And expanding those franchises, right? Like there's expansions to the Wick franchise. We're hoping that we can. This book from Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, represents a expansion of its universe into Cornelius Snow's backstory as a kid. So it gives a little more texture to that world. But other than that, we're fighting, we're scrapping, we're scrapping, and any information or data that can inform the audience potential, or at least the contours of the audience in advance of those decisions. We hope it's helpful. It's got to be helpful. I think it's so hard to make a predictive case for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it seems like you're absolutely right, because you are up against it's like a David versus Goliath scenario, where Goliath
it was, and now it's worse.
Now it's worse. That's true. It's like you're like the small little mouse compared to like King Kong almost. And I think it's smart the way you guys are tackling it, because I just remember how we used to do things at Fox. It was just like the research game was always just sort of like validating already previous decided decisions, more or less. It was just basically
no discovery. It was
no discovery, no sort of like, let's figure this out. It was more like, this is what we're doing. Just tell us this is right. Just find the research so we know that this is right. It wasn't like, okay, we're going to
give me my score. Give me my definite interest.
Exactly. Like,
how to test.
What's the number? Not like, what is it? What are the comments? What's the more rich background? It was like, what's the number? And that was all that mattered. And it's interesting that you guys are sort of being a little bit more forward. And I think you're right. You have to be, because you are up against these Goliaths that are just blank checks. So much.
Yeah. And also that is it, definite interest in particular is such an interesting little metric that we have used across. It's in testing, it's in tracking, it's in every facet of our kind of interface with the consumer. Mm-hmm. Yet, what does it really mean? Right. So that we're also trying to unpack and think more holistically and realistically about what information we're gathering from people, and then how to really use that in a more effective way. Because if you think about it, definite interest is me saying, I'm looking at a trailer that is 6 to 9 months from now. It's me simply expressing a positive intention toward potentially buying it. It's like,
you're going to buy a ticket 6 months from now. Yeah, sure.
Yes. Oh, I'm definitely interested. I'm definitely interested in going to the moon. I'm definitely interested in moving to Australia and opening up a pot farm. It ain't happening.
Yeah.
So how do we better? How do we then better understand the relationship between the material and the consumer in that moment of exposure, right? And I think one of the because another area that's always been fascinating to me, and that we've even dallied with, I think, a little bit at Fox, was biometrics and understanding that subconscious response to material. But then again, a lot of that too is hard to understand how to make sense of it, right? What's the predictive capacity of that, my heart rate, or the way my eyes are tracking a material, and what that means with respect to my emotional state in terms of my ultimate behavior. One area that we're really interested in that I think is really ripe for exploitation is the concept of immersion. So it's when you are into something, like when you're into a show or into a movie or into a series, you're immersed. You are engaged emotionally and cognitively with the story and the characters and their journey, right? And when people are immersed, there's a biochemical marker that is released. Oxytocin is released in the body, right? That bonding chemical. And so these guys that we were experimenting with, and I still really want to do this for a screening because I think it's such a better way to get at like the most salient moments, is to see when there was the peak immersion, right? Mm-hmm. When I was so lost in the flow of the story that I forgot where I was. We're all trying to find that sensation, right? In our day-to-day lives, it's like, it's what meditation provides for you. It's like exercise provides that. It's that escape. And so to the extent that we can turn our advertising materials into kind of like immersion missiles, right? And the thing is, like, we can, like, 30s are almost dead, in my estimation, right? You got to be 15 is your new story spot. And you're down to like 6s and bumpers, right?
You're right.
Or the Tony Sella tweezer.
The tweezer, the 6-second tweezer. You'll always claim you invented it.
Because as an outsider, let me kind of, jump in, because I almost feel like we're trying to imagine we could pre-program this stuff into people and therefore get engagement, opposed to what we've really experienced in most of our lifetimes is it was already made and then we were responding to it, opposed to, hey, I know what the response is going to be, therefore I'm going to make it. And Keith, I almost feel like you do this with your clients where you're recognizing when the data is wrong and trying to say, well, listen, I get that the major studios, I know what their decision point's going to be, and this AI thing has a certain decision-making point, but in reality, this actually is good.
Yeah.
And I'm going to walk you through the process of what marketing is going to look like in order for people to see what it actually is, regardless of what AI compares it to already existing kind of stuff. Because where would Chris Nolan be if we were comparing him to Michael Bay? Like, you'd be like, there's similarities, but the differences are what make the difference. And AI can only capture what already was. It can't project things forward, but the human mind has this part. So Tim, I'm going to guess, go ahead, Keith, because I know this is what you deal with a lot.
Yeah, I was going to say, I do run into that a lot with some of my clients because they are, very data heavy and data sort of like, this is what the data is telling us. And I'm like, yes, but that's data based. And a lot of times it's like, well, it's the classic, like so-and-so meets so-and-so. Well, this is what they did with this movie, so this is what we need to do with our movie. And it's sort of like, well, that's not necessarily how this really works. And you need to sort of take a little deeper dive into it. And it's interesting you brought up Chris Nolan because he has one of my favorite quotes about that I always, when I was at Fox, I'd always sort of pop into my head anytime, any one of myriad of my supervisors was always asking, what is a test? What are the numbers? And I'm like, and Chris Nolan had this quote. He's like, instant reaction is always like the least most accurate. I'm butchering it, but it's always the least most accurate judge of what somebody actually feels about something. You think about it when you were walking out of a movie and you ask that person, what do you think of it? You kind of like, yeah, it was good. And then maybe, the next day you're like, you know what? You kind of got to sit for a little bit. So that's why I always felt like instant reaction wasn't always the best way to judge something. And, I think it's smart that you guys are looking at sort of deeper interaction. And then it's very true that the theatrical experience is definitely the best way to do that, because when you're sitting watching a Netflix show, you have your iPad going, you've got your phone, you're running like 3 or 4 different devices all at once. So you're not really paying attention. But in a theatrical world, you pay attention. So you can really dive into sort of the data, really get a sense of what is really hitting the audience and what's really working. If they could ever figure out how to make that work, that would be brilliant, because that would inform more than just sort of like the instantaneous reactions. Right. That you try in the blue book. It was always like, I always have to go through the back of the blue book to see like, okay, what's the highest number of scene mentions? Yeah. And then we'd create the blue book special, which was basically like all the scene mentions, the highest testing scene mentions cobbled together with a title on it. You're like, yes, this is going to get a 70. And it comes back 50.
Right. Because it ignores the interrelationship between those moments.
Yeah.
Right. You only have a peak because of its relationship to the valley surrounding it.
Yeah.
In terms of like a scene count. Exactly right. It's with that other thing you were talking about in terms of like the kind of the potential flaws of an instantaneous reaction. That COVID has given us an opportunity to do things that we probably wouldn't have done before, like do focus groups for a research screening the next day.
Yeah.
And virtually. So people are in their homes, they're on this computer. I mean, virtual focus groups, I don't want to do them any other way. Honestly, it's been miraculous. You're able to instantaneously have national representation in a panel of like 15
I never thought about that.
Right?
That's brilliant.
Yeah, that's cool. And then with a virtual screening, right? We've done several of those until now. We're back in theaters, but people watch it at home. They get to chew on it, and then they come back with like much better form.
Yeah, because it's always interesting because after the screenings, one, they're usually on a weekday night, so you're keeping people from getting home. And if they hated the movie and you get them to hang around, they're annoyed because they want to leave. So you're not always going to get a very positive experience. And I love the fact of virtual because my biggest issue, having been, you're a Midwestern guy, born and raised. I'm pseudo Midwestern by almost, but Pittsburgh's not really Midwestern, but it's close. But it always used to annoy me. We'd be like, oh, we're going to get tested. So we're going to Sherman Oaks. Really? Sherman Oaks? That's a great representation of the rest of the country. Oh, wait, no, we're going to go to Thousand Oaks. Oh, even better. But see, this just actually make that hard, because it was like the one time I think we did it right was when we did Avatar. We were bouncing all over the country with focus groups. We went to Denver, we went to Atlanta. We were going all over because we knew we had a big whopper on our hands that we had to, figure out. So we were getting a massive sample. And I'm like, I wish every movie could do that, because that's how you really get a sense of like what's going to appeal across all the demographics, coastal, middle America, flyover country, what have you. So that's great. I mean, you're absolutely right.
It's like what we call flyover is evolving, right?
Yeah.
Like it'll change. It's going to change within the next year. Like there's like an exodus from some cities. Los Angeles is down in population for the first time since I've lived here, fucking 20 plus years.
Yeah.
People are leaving, right? Because it's too expensive. They want cleaner air. They want less congestion.
Yep.
And so and consumer taste will evolve as such, right?
Yeah, if you're going to the Hollywood perspective, you have to go to Wyoming, because that feels like all the Hollywood people went to
exactly.
Montana, Wyoming.
Or Texas, Austin, Dallas, Houston, Arizona, Utah.
Yep.
I just feel like, sometimes when people talk the way you guys are kind of talking about research and what have you, I just wonder where genius falls in. Because like, how did Alfred Hitchcock know to make those movies that everyone would like? Because I can't imagine it would really, win in research. They're just such odd films, but it's the body of work and his specific genius of storytelling that you have to be a human and a human mind and somebody that is thinking about it day 5, day 10 after watching the film that really sticks with you more. So how does that play out in marketing? How do you take that into account? Or do you guys find as marketing leaders, you have to fight for that more to say to a studio leader, hey, I get where the numbers are, but trust me, marketing has the ability to get people in the seats. Or, hey, I know what the numbers say, but trust me, this is a film that people will attach to regardless of what you think, that research is doing for us.
Oh yeah, I was laughing at the "trust me" because that's always like the kiss of death. If anyone opens a sentence with that, I never say that.
Never say that. Nope.
Okay, apparently I'm not a professional in that market.
It's professional tap dancing is what it is.
Yes, very much.
You're looking at so many tea leaves and like, oh, good Lord, and especially in the trying to interpret tracking in this COVID landscape, it's getting so much better, thank goodness. But it's tracking both energy tracking and like the and Wikipedia search and Google, and with working with our analytics partners and determining kind of where the like volume and intent profiles are, how that's shaping up. It's all such a soup right now.
Yeah.
And everyone wants assurances, and the double-edged or the real challenge, I think, for us in research and analytics has been, because we've always had the safety net of box office as a hard predictive kind of, like, we know, right? We know we come on tracking. We need this much unaided. We need this much first choice. Here are the levers to push to get there. Media and creative. Let's do it. That's all up in the air. now.
Yeah.
And so we're sort of using some of those same muscles, interpretive muscles that we had used in the old world, as we call it now.
Yeah, right.
But also it's evolving incredibly dynamically. I think there are still foundational elements, like top of mind, right? Always matters. What my unaided first choice is, right? That I want to go see matters as it relates to its proximity to the actual behavior. But apart from that, I'm not sure anymore. I'm not sure. I think we need a more holistic look at the entertainment consumption landscape, inclusive of VOD and
I think
platform titles.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, Tim, you brought up genius. It's like, the classic Steve Jobs, like nobody knew they wanted an iPhone until it was created.
Right.
Nobody knew they wanted it until it was in front of them. And I think that's really a lot of what, I love the idea of being more immersive research and data, but at the end of the day, it's always going to be a business driven by hits and the ability to take chances on movies that aren't always necessarily going to be guaranteed for sure money makers. And I don't know how long it'll be till we get sort of back to that. I mean, when Richard Rushfield was on, we talked a little bit about, Irving Thalberg, who was 26 when he was the head of production at Columbia Pictures, like making all these crazy deals. Mike DeLuca at New Line, he was 27 when he was the president of production, or 28 or something like that. Like just making all these crazy decisions and making all these movies that a well-experienced 50-plus-year-old head of a studio isn't going to make those kind of decisions. So, I love the idea of more immersive data, but at the same time, part of me mourns the idea that there's going to be less risk taking unless there's more data to back up there's no sure thing. But I miss some, granted, I worked at New Line, so I obviously have a special place in my heart for it, but it was a rebel studio, and Bob Shea was like, no, I don't care. I want to make it. Let's do it. And I kind of miss that sort of, cowboy sort of yeehaw, let's ride it and see what happens vibe that I think is somewhat lost, because so many people are just looking for like okay, tell me this is like going to work. And I'm worried.
My bets.
I'm worried the pandemic has sort of pushed us towards that way of thinking versus the sort of, I like this idea. I think this is going to be a great theatrical experience. Do it. Anyway, granted, I'm not sitting in the chair making those decisions, but
I just working at Trailer Park too, and Benedict Coulter, who was one of the founders at Trailer Park, he often just writes the story behind the trailers that he's made for 30 or 40 years, right? He's telling the first time he met Spielberg and how this worked, or what he and Michael Bay decided. And you realize that there was kind of a challenge. Like New Line said, we're going to make it because I want to make it, and I know what I can do with it. And then you had other creative collaborators getting the message out there in a creative way, telling the story in a creative way, cutting a trailer in a creative way. And the commoditization of all that really just goes down to like, well, can we get mass content? Let's just acquire another big library and make another sequel from some universe platform or whatever, and no longer have these kind of breakthroughs. Or maybe we are getting some breakthroughs. I mean, some of the Oscar nominations last year were clearly off from what was a popular center, for better or worse or whatever. But I'm just like, you guys are the marketers. There's got to be something that you realize, like, yeah, totally different job than it was 30 years ago when I started doing this or whatever.
10 years ago. I mean,
sure.
I mean, I remember rushing a spot across the street so we could get it on Friends or American Idol, like, because we wanted to see our tracking go up 10 points. Those days are done. And that was only like 10 years ago.
We're bringing three-quarter tapes to the focus groups.
Yes, exactly.
Boxes.
And they had to be in an exact order. I had to take the slate off. Oh,
insane.
I'm already getting PTSD.
I remember Trailer Park, they would call into the phone company to get fiber patch.
Oh yeah, AT&T.
Edit bay into and so because nobody had time to drive between the two spaces because we were at such tight deadlines or whatever. Like,
I always had to call AT&T to clear a line. That's what my thing. I'd like to. The good night align is what we'd call it. Good night align. Yeah.
So funny.
Good times.
Well, Tim, it's so insightful to kind of, get the insides playbook. It sounds like Lionsgate is, embracing this. And I love the fact you're coming from, kind of a smaller player that has the opportunity to be nimble, ask different questions. But it also sounds like you guys are in the competitive marketplace, having to also step up into the data world, ask some of the bigger questions, and also, take the tools that are available nowadays and play with those as well.
Yeah.
It sounds like a challenging time and exciting time for you.
Really exciting. I couldn't be happier to be in the middle of this muck as we're coming out of it. Really, that's what it is. It's kind of like
yeah, I think you're definitely at, one of the better places to be at the moment. I think some of the other studios are either way high pressure or just they're, there's a mess and nobody knows if they're going to be acquired or whatever. And you're definitely, you're right.
All over the headlines,
yeah,
right? That MGM deal.
Right. Yeah, that's true. But I think, to Tim's point, you guys are able to be nimble, and that's something that's kind of cool, especially in the current environment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it sounds like you have a studio you can bring some of your clients' projects to. Lionsgate seems to be willing to experiment more than
that's definitely true, because they're definitely most of the projects are definitely not for like a Disney. I'll tell you that.
Yeah,
I'm not going to be on Disney Plus anytime soon.
Yeah, so you're right. That's like we have an emerging identity. It's weird because we're not like A24 has been able to craft a studio specific identity,
right?
Transcendent of the material. Most of us aren't there really, unless you're Disney, basically. Right?
The only one has identity, yeah,
right, or A24, and that's like this. Yeah. So I don't know if it matters per se, but I think we can define it through the decisions we make and like the areas that we have really fun, exciting, diverse slate coming up that is like touches a broad swath of audience, which is always refreshing for us on the marketing side, or in the research side, is to have a family title once in a while. It's kind of nice. Have a horror title once in a while is kind of fun and nice. Have a comedy is kind of fun and kind of nice. We do have one movie though that I really want to pitch because I'm so excited about. It's called The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. It's Nicolas Cage playing Nicolas Cage with Pedro Pascal in a it's delicious.
Ooh, delicious! I like that review.
Yeah. There's a scene where they trade shoes. I'll do it with Pedro Pascal and because I won't give anything else away. Pedro Pascal and Nick Cage have this developing bromance that is just, I of course I fell in love with Pedro during The Mandalorian. Head over heels.
Right.
So the look in his eyes is the way I want him to look at me. He's looking at Nick. It's so awesome. It's so awesome. There's one moment that almost made me pee my pants when they change shoes, and I'm going to leave that there. So you have to see the movie. But when they swap shoes, Nick and Pedro, it is magic.
Who's the director? It's not like a documentary, right? It's like
it's not a documentary. It's real.
Oh, he's going to look it up. There he goes. Well, that sounds awesome.
I think Tim's playing a marketing game with us right now, leaving us with a little cliffhanger here.
Well,
like that.
He actually took advantage. Like, we've had people on here from other studios and they don't pump their own stuff. And I'm like, why would you take Tim's like, I'll totally pump a movie. I don't care. I love it.
Who was it?
Tom Gormican.
When's it come out?
TBD.
There you go. That big distribution decision.
Right.
Dun, dun, dun.
Right. We have like, I think our next two movies are pretty firm. Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard is in with Ryan Reynolds and Sam Jackson and Selma Hayek.
Yeah.
And Antonio Banderas and Morgan Freeman.
That's a good sequel. I love those. That first one was pretty fun.
It's a total turn your brain off laugh movie. And you will laugh. I guarantee there's two moments in that movie that will make you do spit takes or your money back.
All right, cool.
Marketer said it. He said it
email Lionsgate for my refund. I'm gonna attach this clip. Be like, Tim says I can get my money back. See below.
Hopefully not. Hopefully we are actually up for that higher.
There you go.
Well, Tim, thanks for being part of our show. We appreciate you kind of joining us today.
Long-time viewer, first-time participant.
There you go. Nice. I like it.